Greetings and welcome to another exciting episode of Analogpod. I'm your host, Leonard Carrillo, and together we're going to explore, probe, and celebrate the passions and very interesting journeys of artists and musicians from across the fruited plain. Today, I'm so very honored to have with us a renowned session guitar player, as well as a wonderful friend of mine, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee, Mr. Paul Brannon. So sit back, relax, and enjoy today's episode of Analogpod. And please don't forget to click that like button, as well as if you hadn't subscribed to the channel, please hit subscribe. So enjoy today's episode. Well, we're here with Paul Brannon. Thank you, Paul, for being here. How are you doing?
Doing well at the moment. Cannot complain, or shouldn't, you know.
How are you holding up with all this craziness, this COVID craziness?
Well, you know, actually, I haven't had to change too much of what I was doing. My work was kind of slowing down anyway, so it wasn't like the bottom dropped out like a lot of these folk that had a big tour scheduled, and all of a sudden they don't have a big tour scheduled. Right. So I was already kind of making the adjustments. I'm sort of like on that fine line between, am I still doing this or am I retired? Am I still doing this, or, you know, so yeah, that part wasn't too bad. And so far, we have not had symptoms that made us feel like we had to get tested. Back in a year ago in February, I had a dry cough that was unusual for a couple of weeks, but I don't remember having any fever. And that was before you could get a test anyway.
Right.
And then in the 1st of March, we had the big tornadoes here in Nashville, and you know, about a half mile from us, there was some stuff that was totally flattened, but, you know, so, I mean, I feel like we've been, you know, blessed, and, you know, feel sorry for all the people that had to do all this extra stuff and clean up and loss and people losing friends and family to this virus. And yep. I mean, you know, not to bring it down, but it's like, wow, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, but we, you know, thankfully we are not affected by it as much. So,
well, I'm very glad to hear that. And and you're back in Nashville. How's the weather back there?
Well, it's a lot nicer than last week. You know, we had ice and snow everywhere, basically shut everything down for a week. And then now, you know, we had a day in the 70s, and now it's like in the 60s.
Oh, so surfing, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, that's Tennessee for you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's all kind of looking like spring this week.
Well, you know, Paul, I'm so honored to have you on the show, and our audience to get to know you. And we were just kind of sharing before the show, just kind of our past, our history, and yeah, it goes back a long ways. The first time I met you, your father was pastoring a church here in Sacramento, where I'm located, and we were playing in a band. That we were doing some stuff at the church, and you were there. I don't remember meeting you back then, but later when we went on tour with you, you were bandmate with Joe English, former
right.
drummer of Paul McCartney and Wings.
Right.
We go on this tour, and we were so delighted to realize that you were playing guitar with Joe English, and so we got to kind of meet up again, and and then we kind of took a break, didn't we?
Yeah, you know, about a generation's worth of a break. And then, well, you know, Michael Gregory, a mutual friend of ours,
yes.
He was in Nashville for a long time, and you know, we eventually, right before he was set to move back to Sacramento, he came by for a little visit, and he wanted to hear a couple of pedals he was trying to decide on, and I said, yeah, I've got that here, you want to come over and listen? So, you know, so we hooked up again, and so, you know, so here we are.
Yeah, you know, it's a big world, but it's a small world. you know.
Yeah.
It's
Couple
interesting.
degrees of separation, you know, just about everybody.
That's it. That's absolutely that's it. Yeah, I was telling, we lost a great jazz musician a few weeks ago, Chick Corea, and
Oh man, yeah.
I was telling Mike about it, the experience that I said I came this close from meeting Chick Corea. I said I went to do a session at Mad Hatter Studios, which is he owns,
Yeah.
and uh, I pulled into the session and went into the control room to let the engineer and producer know that I was there. And anyway, we got to talking. Da 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 da. I said, by the way, I said, is Chick Corea going to be around? And the engineer goes, dude, you just missed him like 5 minutes. I said, well, is he coming back? Because I said, I really want to meet this guy.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he's one of my heroes. And he goes, no, he says he's heading out for a plane. He's going to do a gig or whatever. And I sit there going,
Yeah.
I said,
Oh man.
I'm really sorry I got a chance. But anyway, I got a chance to record in the studio, which was awesome. But well, listen, Paul, let's get to know you a little bit. So I got a few questions that I'm sure the audience is curious. When did you decide to pick up the guitar and give us that story?
Okay, yeah, the whole guitar thing. Well, both my parents played keyboards, so I was around music, from a young age. We had like recordings of classical stuff, and of course the church music with those 19th century Wesleyan hymns and stuff like that. So it was all in the environment. I took some piano lessons, didn't really stick. My uncle's old trumpet found its way into my hands, and I played some trumpet in grade school. But when the Beatles started happening, of course, I wasn't glued to the TV screen. I was in church like a good preacher's kid, So, so it took a while to catch up with the mop tops, as it were. But the Saturday morning cartoon show, I was glued to that. And we had an old woolen sack tape recorder that I could stick the mic on the floor in front of the TV and record the songs and listen to them later. And that is where my enthusiasm for guitar-driven music started. So my dad had a ukulele, and I remember trying to figure out the riff to Wipeout on that thing. You're missing a couple of strings and it's not quite right, but you can sort of hear the pitches.
Sure.
So after being kind of obsessed with the Beatles, I guess I was around 11 when my folks, you remember green stamps that they would give you at the grocery store, and you'd collect them in books, and then you could go to the Redemption Center and pick something out. So I had a green stamp guitar. It was an import with action, about this far off the 12th fret. There are a lot of guys born in the 50s started off with the equally horrible guitar, but it also taught me that I really want to do this, because even though this hurts to press the strings down, I really want to learn how to do this. And so that's when it started. And I can't remember when I started picking things. I was learning guitar by ear. With the trumpet, of course, I was looking at music and the little bit of piano I had, but guitar was sort of like my own world. I can hear things and I can figure out what they're playing, and I can do it. So it was really just sort of a different world from what I'd had before. And eventually I caught up. I got like a Mel Bay 4400 guitar chords book, where they show you where to put your fingers. They don't tell you what order to play these chords in or what you should do with them. And then also I think the Frederick Node book, which was like classical based, where I learned that you're supposed to keep your thumb behind the neck, instead of wrapped around. So to this day, I see loads of great players with their thumb like hanging over the bottom strings. It's like, not me. But anyway, I got really into it around age 11 or 12. And then for some reason, there was a summer where I didn't have my guitar about age 12. And then when I got back to it, it was like, wow, it's hard to play this stuff that I used to be able to play. I don't ever want to stop playing that long again. And so I didn't, basically just kept playing. When I was about 13, that right? Yeah, about 13. It was when I went into a music store and played an electric guitar. It's like, oh, you mean this doesn't have to hurt? So that's when my parents gave in and bought me a used Vox Bulldog, which was kind of like an Italian made Strat copy. And then eventually what was my first? I used to play through that same woolen sack tape recorder. You could use it in PA mode. You could plug things in the back and come out that little 5-inch speaker. Yep. Nice and distorted, Yep. And so that was my first amp. And then eventually got a little Vox Cambridge Reverb solid state amp. And I was on my way, There
you go. There you go. Do you remember your first paid gig?
That question made me reach back. I think it was in high school. There was this, I can't remember if he was still in high school or if he was going to the college, but it was like a duo thing where he needed just a second guitar player to do lead fills and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I can't even remember which college it was. It might have been a junior college outside Orlando, which is where we ended up moving in my, when I was in 8th grade and stayed there through high school. But yeah, I think that was the first paid gig. And I think it might have been, I don't know, might have paid me $40. It was like, whoa, yeah. Yeah. That's serious. In 1973 or 72 or whenever that was. I don't remember.
Oh, that's big money now.
Well, hey, no kidding. Yeah. No kidding. With the ultra discount rate for streaming plays that we have now, supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, your early influence, you had mentioned the Beatles. Who are some of the other early influence?
Well, let's see, what else is going on? When the last part of 7th grade, my dad had already started the process of moving to Orlando. My mom was up in Indiana dealing with the aftermath of her mother passing away. And so I was basically staying with a family there in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And I was rooming with an 18-year-old, being 12, 13, rooming with an 18-year-old. You're definitely getting some influence. He was a good guy. He wasn't leading me astray, but every night we were going to sleep with like the Beatles' White Album or Cream Disraeli Gears or the Glenn Campbell singles like Wichita Lineman or Galveston. There was a lot of music coming in, Lemon Piper's Green Tambourine. So I was hearing all this stuff. And of course, the White Album had a lot of cool stuff on it. I didn't even know it was Eric Clapton on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. But I heard, I guess subliminally, I heard some parallels between that and what I was hearing on Disraeli Gears. And I'm going, I kind of know where those notes are. I bet I could figure this out, and so those are some of my early influences that were really being soaked in. And then once there was some TV show, once we got to Florida, and I've tried to find it on the internet since then, but I think it might have been Flip Wilson subbing for Dick Cavett or something. Anyway, some late night talk show, and Hendrix was on. And he started playing a song, and his amp blew, and they had to cut to commercial, and he came back and played. But I heard him do some of his stuff, and I'm going, I want to find out how to get that sound. That's something I want to know how to do. And, all of that stuff, the late 60s, early 70s seemed to be an explosion of creativity The record companies were throwing money at everything because they didn't know what was going to stick. It was such a crazy time, and they had the money to do. They had the money to throw. That's why bands like Yes got a chance. That's why bands like, King Crimson and Frank Zappa and, all this stuff that, now would you have to start in some little hole in the wall and hopefully get a crowd and then maybe get on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I just had a guest on a couple of days ago, and we were talking about the music scene and being very, very fortunate, being our age. Okay, we won't disclose
Yeah.
that, but to being our age, we just didn't know that it wasn't that it was just always there. It was just always there. I
We didn't
mean,
know how unusual it was,
yeah,
because
yeah,
coming out of the 50s, the straight-laced 50s, and all of a sudden, the thing that fascinates me so much about the British invasion was, here are these English kids hearing American black music
mhm,
because it's being brought in, the seaports,
yeah,
sailors would bring it in, and Liverpool, or London or whatever, and they'd be hearing Muddy Waters, they'd be hearing Chuck Berry, they'd be hearing Howlin' Wolf and all this stuff. We weren't hearing that, even though it might have been like, 5 miles away, but we didn't go to that side of the tracks,
right.
unless you were like in Memphis or somebody, and you were cross pollinating, as it were, a little more. That's how Reggie Young, got a lot of his soulful influence. Great Nashville session player who's passed on. But there was a lot more, depending on where you were and what your background was, you might have mixed it up a little bit. But when the Beatles were doing stuff like, oh, She's a Woman, I'd heard dominant seventh chords before, but I'd never heard them as the tonic chord of the song.
Mm, mhm,
And that to me was what's so fresh about the Beatles. I was hearing, chords I'd heard before, melodies I'd heard similar to before, but I'd never heard them in that combination. And it's like, where is this coming from? This is cool. And of course, they were, interviews, they were trying to emulate some of the doo-wop groups or the Motown stuff, but it was coming through this sort of Church of England choral filter, that they all kind of grew up with over there. And it was such an interesting hybrid to me, and I didn't understand what it was. I just liked it.
sure, sure, yeah,
Later on, I started understanding why I liked it, but I just dug it. And a steady pulse, the backbeat, the drums. That was what I wanted to play first, was drums. I was like, no, that's too loud and expensive. Yeah, guitar really fixed that.
yeah. No, it's interesting because I think most musicians I've met, they wanted to start. I wanted to play drums, and my opportunity to play drums in school. I mean, there was a line,
Yeah,
out the door for those guys that wanted to play drums, and then it's like, well, then I'm not going to get the band. Okay, so oh, there's a trumpet over there, or there's a trombone. So I picked the trumpet.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. So yeah,
All right, Trumpet Brothers.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, you learn how to do that. But it's interesting because when I first started playing, I had to learn by ear because I didn't read. In fact, I still don't read. Um, I had to learn so many different styles of music that was playing on the AM radio at the time, because we were out playing, in these, these dances and different things. And so, there were things I was being influenced by that I really didn't know I was being influenced by. I mean, obviously the Beatles, which I loved, but I mean, it was kind of like the music top 40. That's the list. That's what you learn how to play.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so, but I look at that and I'm going, oh, I'm so glad I was kind of forced into that, because
yeah.
it kind of laid a very, very strong foundation. It was interesting. I was talking to one of the person I was interviewing not long ago, and I said, it's interesting because the music that I was listening to And the music that I really, really enjoyed was not the music I was playing.
Yeah.
Okay. It was not the music I was playing. I was playing in a rock band, usually, I was playing in rock bands. And I said, it wasn't that I didn't like rock, but I said, I was a guy that I gravitated towards Seals and Croft,
Mm-hmm.
the Carpenters,
Mm-hmm.
Bread.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and they'd sit there and you go, okay, how did you survive? And I said, well, because that was music that made sense to me. This music over here, that's the stuff that was, paying my rent. So
Yeah.
so that
Well, it's interesting, it's like you can read interviews with metal guys now, and some of them say, well, I don't even listen to heavy music unless we're playing. I'm like listening to classical or soul or hip hop or, and I guess I was always interested in a lot of different stuff. I mean, the classical ambience that I grew up in, and the choral, 4-part hymn stuff from church. I learned how to sing harmony when I was a kid and found the bass lines, and because my voice started changing and going low. So all of that was part of it too. And you have all this harmonic background, and all that was interesting to me. And yet I could enjoy like a 1-chord tune like Sly and Family Stone, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself Again. The groove and the, what they did over that 1 chord,
absolutely.
So I was always kind of all over the place too, which I guess, served me well. I mean, I sort of look at my abilities now as like 2 miles wide and 2 inches deep, because I do lots of different stuff. I've gotten to do lots of different stuff, different styles. And instead of just being a specialist, like, being a Stevie Ray Vaughan, be the greatest blues player this year or this generation or whatever, I was like, well, I like blues, but I also like classical. And I also want to learn how to play the oud a little bit. And, so I was into, because of the Beatles again, the Ravi Shankar thing. I would put on classical Indian music in high school. I'd like listen to a whole album side of that and just hear how the raga developed, and the tabla player and all the interesting rhythms. And speaking of 1 chord, I mean, it's like there's the tonic, and they're playing all this melodic stuff over that. It never changes, usually a C sharp, isn't it? But anyway, so all that stuff was part of my background too. And I was interested in odd time signatures, like the Don Ellis Big Band, where they took, Dave Brubeck's thing, said, okay, yeah, we'll match that and double it. How's 2316? Yeah, how does that go? You're just feeling pulses at that point, But, so all that was filtering. In high school, I got a chance to be in a stage band where me and my guitar playing buddy, his name was Scott Butch. He may see this or he may not, but we hung out and we would jam a lot, and we had our little high school band, and we tried to learn some Mahavishnu tunes and actually pulled it off, kind of, sort of. And so we were trading off guitar and bass with the high school stage band, and that was one of my first experiences reading charts. Mm-hmm. With guitar, trying to go, oh yeah, maybe reading is something I should learn how to do on this instrument. But the band director would usually give us the solos because we were used to improvising without, reading something off the page. And some of the horn players were good, but they weren't used to improvising as much as we were, because we were used to that whole ear thing, and, our jam sessions would be somebody play something and somebody play something with it, and then just make up something as we go. I mean, that was sort of the thing back then, and you would hear elements of that in the Allman Brothers, where they've got the song structure, but then in the middle, it goes somewhere, who knows where it's going to go tonight. Yep. And they'll be a cue lick and they'll bring it back in. And, all that was part of my upbringing too. So yeah, I'm going to go off on lots of tangents like this, man.
No,
it's just so fun. It's just so fun. This music stuff is such a blessing for us humans.
Yeah. Well, this is a great segue into, I had the opportunity to pull some of your. This is your discography here.
Oh,
Uh,
really?
yeah, and I don't know if you've ever had a chance to pull it up, but it's quite
Well,
interesting.
I went to All Music back when I
Yeah.
first heard about it, and some of that stuff was actually true. There were a couple of things that weren't.
Okay, all right.
Just a couple. They had a pretty good average, and then I went back there like sometime last year, and it was like all gone. So I don't know. Maybe I wasn't on the right site.
It's all here, baby.
There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff, huh?
It's
Okay.
all here. Yeah, yeah. And so which this fascinates me. I've been called on a very, very, very limited basis to come in and play bass on somebody else's album or somebody else's
Mhm.
project, and so I don't have the range of experience, but it's interesting because one of the fascinating things that I look at your discography here. I mean, you've played with, and correct me if I'm wrong, please.
Yeah.
I mean, there's everyone from Dolly Parton to obviously Joe English. That's how we met. Um, Randy Matthews. I mean, the list goes. The list is here. You can look
Well,
that.
I mean, Dolly wasn't in the room. It's
Yeah, no.
possible. It may have been that. Well, I actually don't know. I mean, I've done stuff for Dolly Wood,
Mhm.
and Dolly may have sung on it. So there's that.
Well,
So,
the song was called "I Believe in You."
oh, that sounds familiar.
Yeah,
That sounds familiar. Yeah, I probably did do that then.
yeah, and yeah, and that so but I so I'm fascinated. Okay, when I first saw the documentary, The Wrecking Crew,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
the session, I have never ever aspired to go. I want to be a session player. Okay, uh, I just I just don't I just don't have it.
Well, I understand that because I wanted to be a band member. I
Yeah,
wanted to write songs. I wanted to be like that little, that little family that gets along and is successful and tours the world and everybody's wonder. And it's like I wanted to be that band member guy, and that's where I kind of started off.
yeah.
And I thought, man, these poor sessions. I'd read Guitar Player magazine. That was kind of my window into that world, since I didn't have anybody in the family that was doing music for a living. And I thought, man, these session guys, it seems like 90% of the time they're just being told what to do. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun to me. And then I started reading Tommy Tedesco's column, and I read how much he made in 3 hours. Oh, that's more than I'm making 2 weeks doing this temporary job at a factory, you know.
That is that
Yeah.
is true. But
So that time, that kind of realigned my priorities. Like, well, if I ever get off the road, maybe that's what I want to do. Somebody that can stay relevant just because I'm versatile and they can call me and whatever. Then it's like, well, maybe this is something I need to work toward. But I get it. It's like the session world is. It can be a lot of pressure. It can be a lot of uncertainty. It can be some, you're asked to do some crazy things sometime, so trying to interpret a client that, you know, well, yeah, this jingle is supposed to appeal to yuppies, but we're talking about yuppies that would backpack across Europe, and you're supposed to make a musical change based on that, you
okay.
know. Okay, right.
Tell them, oh, you know what? This session requires me to bring the crystal ball, which I don't have with me today.
Yeah.
And
I got one friend that says, yeah, I can read music, but I can't read minds.
that's it. That's it. That's it.
But you have to learn how to read the minds. You have to learn how to, or even if you're just guessing, you just do something different and see if it sticks. Maybe it will.
I did a session on a country western album. Okay, and I got called, and it was somehow the bass player that they had lined up couldn't make it or something. Anyway, I got called, and they said, actually the lead singer gave me a call, and he goes, hey Leonard, he goes, hey, are you available? Can you come down? And this, and I said, well, first of all, number one, I don't read. So you're going to have to give me some time with the music. Okay.
Mhm.
Leonard, you got it. You got it. You got, no, just come on down. You can do it. You can do it.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah.
They're kind of going, well, you got more faith than me than I
Yeah.
have in myself, brother. So anyway, so I pack up my bass and, I head down to the studio and I walk in there and I go, okay, can you give me, obviously the basic track? Do you have something? And he said, no, he said, that's what you're here for. We got to lay the basic tracks down. And I'm going, but I've never heard the song before.
No demo. So
Yeah. So he brings his acoustic guitar out.
Yeah,
Okay.
there you go.
And he starts playing it. I said, okay. So I said, okay. So first time I just listened to it. And second time I go, okay, all right, let's play. All right, that's a C. Okay, we're going to C.
Yeah. Yeah.
An F, okay, a G, or whatever the deal is. I don't remember what it was. But I sat there and I went, okay. I said, I don't know, Dennis. His name was Dennis. I said, I don't know. I said, I will do this. But if you choose not to use it, don't feel like you're going to break my heart.
Yeah.
Because I said, I am laying down literally the basics for you. I mean, I got no time to get a feel of this. And so which brings me to the question, because I had that experience. When you walk into a session, okay, and you may not know what you're walking into.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you switch gears? I mean, and go,
you just learn how to switch gears. I mean, it's like learning how to switch instruments. I mean, when I was, 18 or 19, I basically had one electric guitar played and one acoustic guitar. And now there's like 35 instruments that I've got, in cartage trunks. So, and eventually learned how to feel comfortable on them, at least comfortable enough to kind of sound like I knew what I was doing on them. But it's same with styles. You come in and, they'll either like on I didn't get deep into the country publishing demo world, not nearly as deep as some of my friends, but they'd come in kind of like that, and there would be maybe not a guy just playing with it, a guitar, but they'd have a cassette. Here's our demo, and here's a number chart that somebody wrote out for you. Or sometimes you have to take your own number chart. Sometimes that you're on your own. You're just listening to it down. Can I hear the bridge one more time? You rewind. Is this about where the bridge was? you're scrubbing a chart out so you know where it is. Or sometimes if it's a note reading session, which in Nashville, I guess, was a little more rare. That's one reason I found a job here, because there's no shortage of guitar players. Right. There probably wasn't a shortage of guitar players since the 1940s. But for a guy who could play some different styles and get some good sounds and read, there were opportunities for that. And so you look at the stack of music, or, the one chart or whatever, and you go, oh, this is what they're saying here. So it looks like clean funk, okay, Strat, compressor, depending on what decade it is, maybe kick in a chorus, and then you're off to the races. And sometimes what they write, they want verbatim. Sometimes it's more of a suggestion, and sometimes it's just, like with the number charts, it's like a blank page that you fill in and you make something of it. Which is what I would always hear about the LA guys like Lukather and Porcaro and all those guys. Like, yeah, there'd be this song structure, but as far as all the cool stuff, they were hired to make up the cool stuff. Well, here's a transition we can do. Well, here's an intro. Well, here's a, and it was kind of like that in Nashville, except it seemed, I got the impression that it happened a lot quicker in Nashville. You were expected, like on these country demos, you'd have 3 hours and get 5 songs done with overdubs. And yeah, that's flying. I mean, it doesn't sound like it when you put it that way. It's like, well, 5 times 3 minutes and 30 seconds in 3 hours. But, when you run the thing down 2 or 3 times and by the second pass, you're thinking, okay, I played this on the first. What should I play on? Can I work out something with the steel player? How about the keyboard player? Sometimes these guys would be just flying, just coming up with counter melodies for the vocal. Well, second verse, the fiddle takes the fill, and third verse, guitar, and then bridge is going to be steel. And it happens so fast. And even on the note reading sessions here, we sort of have the reputation of being very productive, getting through this stuff quickly and accurately. The string sections know how to play with a click. The rhythm sections know how to read. At least, the crews that get hired for that stuff. And again, there's lots of great players that aren't so good at the reading and that basically just do number charts, man, and they're brilliant musicians. But it's just it depends on where you think your best job opportunities are. You sort of steer yourself, and there's a sifting process. The producers hire people, try them out. Well, maybe this guy's not so good at this, but he's really good at that, so we'll hire him for that. It's like being in a washing machine and the agitators and the socks and the stuff, and they all different ones clumped together.
Well, with your experience, with your multiple experiences of walking into studios and working with producers, I was sharing my feelings on an interview about producers and how much it's the love-hate situation with these guys. At times you love them, at times you want to strangle them, and then there's times you are so so yeah, it's a love hate. But was there any, and you don't have to mention any names, but was there any producer that you worked with that you said, I will never work with this guy again, or this woman again?
Where you have to fire the client? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I can't really think of anybody where I just said, there's no way I can do this again. A lot of times the ones that are really difficult sort of end up taking themselves out of the game. For whatever reason, or maybe it's not me, maybe it's everybody else saying, I'll never work with you again. And so they disappear and they don't call me either. So I don't know. It is challenging. I mean, there are some people that you work with and you go, they really are in over their head and they don't know how this is supposed to be done. And the band is just going to have to sort of, without being jerks, they're just going to have to take charge and get through the day and get it done. And, hopefully we all get paid and the artist is happy and everybody, but there are those times where it's kind of tricky. And there are also this is an old famous Nashville joke, but, some producers just kind of end up hiring the players they know will produce themselves. And so there's this old joke about, what does a Nashville producer say? I don't know. What do you think? And because that's where that comes from. It's like the keyboard players say, well, what'd you think of that intro? And the producer goes, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think the dynamic is interesting. Like I said, I have a limited amount of time in studio and what I have done. One of my stories is that I was on a session and the producer wanted me to play with a pick.
Yeah.
Okay. I had never played with a pick before.
Oh, this is my.
I knew what it was, and but I'm a finger guy. I'm a finger guy.
Yeah.
Okay. And when he stopped the session, and he goes, hold on, and he walks into the part of the studio where I was. He walks out of the booth, walks into the studio, and he goes, here. He hands me this pick, and he goes, I want you to play with this. And I'm going. I looked at it. It's like, I said. I know that studio sessions cost money. I cost
Yeah.
money. I'm going to be wasting your time and this take.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we come back to this and I can spend some time with the tune and learn how to play with a pick? Okay.
Yeah.
Your
Well,
muscle
that's
memory,
really just a,
your muscle memory, you sit there and go,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
used to playing with my fingers and now I've got to go.
Oh, it's a whole different thing. And then, and to expect a guy that's never done it before go, here's your chance to be famous on my record. Here's your maiden voyage with a pick. It'll be great.
So I packed up my bass. I went back to the hotel, and they gave me a reference track on the cassette.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that dates me. The cassette, and I spent a couple of hours and learned how to. And I thought the part was incredibly boring
Yeah.
because he just wanted me to drum, dun 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 dun.
Yeah. Let me guess what decade that was.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
80s.
So yeah, I can pull out the album right now.
Yeah.
But it was like
You sure you don't want to sequence this, man?
yes, it's like really, you know. And so anyway, I came back into the session, but I remember that was the only time that I really had a bad experience with a producer that went it's like, dude, what's
I mean, did it end up working for him? I
it did.
mean,
It did. It did. In
you
fact,
know,
I still, in fact, I pulled the album out not long ago just to listen to that track, and I just thought,
yeah.
he was right. He was
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
It added a bite to it. It added
Yeah.
it added
There's that's that thing again is about this versatility thing. It's like if you're Jocko, nobody's going to ask you to play with a pick.
yes.
They better not,
Yeah. Yeah.
But if you're into figuring out how to be hireable,
Yeah.
I'd get questions like, can you do this? Or have you got a fill in the blank, dobro, 6-string bass, baritone, whatever, mandolin. And I go, I don't today, but I think I will next time,
I'll have it tomorrow.
Yeah. So, there's that thing where you now there's some things I leave to the pros, actual 5-string banjo and pedal steel. Those things I've just said, you know what, there are people who do that. They really do that. Still, even with that, people have had me fake 5-string banjo parts. My banjo is 4 strings and I tune it like the top 4 of a guitar.
There you go.
And it's good for the Dixieland plectrum style, faking the tenor banjo thing. But I've tried to get on, put finger picks and thumb pick on, and still feels really awkward. But I'll try to figure out some way to simulate a Scruggs type banjo roll and get through the track, and they go, yeah, that's fine, because they didn't want to have to bring in somebody else with their minimum hourly rate to just do one song, So, you end up, you either say no and totally block that off if you're ever, potentially doing that, or you go, well, I'll try that and see what they think, and sometimes you end up, okay, speaking of banjo, I came in off the road fall of '85. I said, this has been fun. I think it's time to move on. I miss being with my wife. I actually like her, and I want to figure out if it's possible to stay in Nashville more and make a living instead of touring all the time. And so one of my did some scrubby songwriter gigs and demos and maybe a couple jingles, and it was like really not kicking in yet. And this was back when Opryland was a theme park that had live music. It was like Disneyland, but instead of everything, most of it being taped, they still had bands in orchestra pits. They still had bands, strolling through the park, like whatever. So I get a call from the music. I'd auditioned like in '86 or '87, I forget. And I was thinking, well, that probably didn't go very well, whatever. But I ended up getting a call from the music director. He says, do you play banjo? Well, no, that's okay. You can use one of ours and you can tune it like a guitar. And I was coming off of this 80s rock and roll stuff thinking, well, if I do anything, it's going to be like, a watered down version of Eddie Van Halen or something. And my first opportunity for a steady gig in Nashville is playing Dixieland banjo on the Showboat.
Oh, that's
In
funny.
the day show where, most of the show was banjo, a little bit of guitar, and it was like, and a little bit of a boarding set with the Dixieland band, like trumpet, clarinet, snare drum, and banjo. And so I'm looking at the guy who played the opposite shift, who's like a serious tenor banjo player, knows exactly everything the way it's supposed to sound. I mean, I'm glued to him going, how can I make this guitar tuned banjo sound more like that? And not having the rapid tremolo thing worked out or anything. But by the end of that season, it was starting to happen. So, something way off my to-do list. Then years later, this tenor banjo fake thing, this New York producer named Burl Red, who did tons of stuff, for school curriculum, music libraries. He loved to work in Nashville. He always would come back and hire the Nashville musicians. I don't know why. He really liked working here. My very first thing with him was like a quick 2-hour thing on, guess what? Fake tenor banjo, the same banjo. And I ended up over the course of like 10 or 15 years playing on thousands of tracks for this guy.
Wow.
He would come down and put Nashville to work for a week, and then go back to New York and have his stable of arrangers, come up with some more stuff and come back to Nashville, put us to work for a week, So it just kept on going. And this curriculum stuff was so fascinating. Speaking of varied styles, I mean, we would do stuff like 1920s jazz, 40s big band, blues like a la B.B. King, American pop. I can't even remember, African pop, suku type stuff with, the guitar playing really high and clean. All of it trying to be as authentic as possible for the school curriculum stuff. And these young arrangers that he had, they were treating everything like it was like going right on their demo reel. And so we were too. It's like we were, instead of cheesing it out for the kids and programming everything, it was like, this was like full brass sections, orchestras, whatever it took to do this stuff right. And it was a wonderful thing to be part of. It was like, it had at the time, it was like one of the biggest single projects, if you call it that had ever run through the union. And we weren't getting like master scale. It was like a low budget or limited pressing, where they, work out a deal, but you can still get some pension money. But it was like this huge project I got to be part of. And for whatever reason, I was in on a lot of it. I wasn't always the star. I mean, if it was the bluegrass flavored stuff, there'd be like serious bluegrass players and I'd be playing my Martin, playing rhythm. But I ended up being on a lot of that stuff. So yeah, blessing.
Oh, that's all. That is.
And thank you, banjo.
Well, listen. Let me switch gears here real quick, because I mean we could. I truly believe this could be a 3-hour interview.
Oh, it could be. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me
Feel free to cut out anything you don't you think doesn't fit.
No. This is great. This is why I'm doing this, is because I'm learning a lot, as well as you having the opportunity to share with the audience, and that's awesome. So Paul, the question I have to ask you: how do you feel about the music that's being produced today?
Man, there's always been a variety of stuff. I mean, I look back to the top 20 in 1970, and there was always like about half of it I did not get at all. I'm serious, and then about half of it I did, oh yeah, I like that, or at least I understood that why somebody else would like it. But there was always like a chunk of it I'm going, man, I'm lost. I don't, who likes this? And so I don't know if it's really changed that much. I mean, musical eras and styles and fashions and all this stuff changes. I mean, I mean, back to the kind of what we are just talking about. I mean, there was a time when the number one fretted instrument in the US was the banjo,
Mhm.
you know, seriously. And the number one popular keyboard instrument was the accordion. Stuff changes and falls out of favor. And, in the 80s, we were worried that drummers were just going to be a dying species because everything was programmed on the drum machine or the Fairlight or the Synclav. And all of a sudden in the 90s, you had drummers and rough and ready guitar sounds kind of reliving the 70s almost. So I don't know where it's headed now. I mean, now we've got, the auto tune thing where even if the singer's good, they still tune them up. You've got things that are so locked to the grid, there's no human feel left. But yet there's still other stuff that's floating around that's nothing but human feel. There's still stuff that's not cut to a click. There's you just sort of have to look for it. And again, with I think one of the big things about the digital era is the supply and demand, because there's like thousands of years of videos on YouTube. To watch them all would take thousands of years.
Sure.
There's so much music out there, and you can get it with no cover charge, no entry fee. You don't have to go to a record store and thumb through the bins and look at the cover and go, wow, I wonder if this is any good. You can just get a sample of it. You can go to Spotify or Apple Music and go, you can hear the whole album, and maybe it costs you $10 a month to be a full subscriber. So there's just so much out there. It's hard to get attention. And so I think a lot of the stuff that does have promotion behind it, or whatever a record label does these days, they're going for the lowest common denominator even more than they used to, and you end up with stuff that I don't particularly care for, but maybe is fun for somebody to play in the background while they're watching something else on. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But then there's like this genius level stuff like Jacob Collier, and he is like he's this British kid that, man, you just have to hear it. I mean, he plays tons of instruments, he sings, his interpretations of existing pop songs are just incredible. He does a version of Moon River. The harmonies are so dense, it's like even beyond what I used to hear with Steely Dan, or there's like these guys, Dirty Loops out of Sweden.
Yes.
Drums, bass, and keyboards and vocals, doing incredibly wonderful, accurate, groovacious, chops-oriented music. I mean, it's like what I thought Tower of Power was so cool.
Yep.
These guys kind of take that like to the next level. So it's not all just dumbed down lowest common denominator stuff. There's like brilliant stuff going on. And then there are these kids that have learned how to play along with records, and they can, they can either sing or play along with like some Ornette Coleman solo. And you're going, I couldn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are all these, you can actually see what people's hands are doing. Like when I used to try to go to a club and try like to see what was going on stage, or, get to the front row in the arena and try to maybe get a glimpse of John McLaughlin's hands, trying to figure out what he was doing, or Jeff Beck or whatever. Now you got close up, 5 camera videos showing you everything that's going on. So the mysteries are gone. And so the musical ability is going up in some ways. I'm just wondering if the creativity and the desire, and well, there's, people debating this, of course, it's like we have all this input all the time. Do you ever get a chance to be bored? Because when we would sit around being bored is when we would get creative and come up with stuff. And I think that's important too, to raise the quality of stuff and to change things for the, make a new era of creative stuff like we experienced in the late 60s and early 70s. So yeah, and maybe it's going on. Maybe I just haven't searched deep enough for it. Long answer.
Yeah, no, it's great. My son, my all of my boys are musicians, and my son sent me a link to it is a program. It's a YouTube channel of these jazz musicians, these very, very young jazz musicians in England. And he sent it to me, and he goes, "Dad, you got to check these guys out." And I said, "Okay." So anyway, I checked them out. I'm sitting there kind of going, I mean,
Yeah.
and it's like, but I also listen to a lot of stuff that is being, kind of mainstream right now. I mean, I was watching a documentary on Tom Petty the other night, and
Oh yeah.
he was talking about, celebrating mediocrity.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
which is basically what, kind of his interpretation of, because a lot of the musicians that I know and I interview here on the show, they put their 10,000 hours plus in.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure.
it's interesting because it's like, I have spent a lifetime, as well as you've spent a lifetime, perfecting your craft. And to one degree or another, we've had a certain amount of success, but it took work. And one of the things I always say is that in order to be able to break the rules, you have to know the rules.
Yeah, it's very helpful.
I look at someone like a Jocko, which is, one of my heroes. I look at Jocko and I'm going, I would never even, profess to be on his level of a bass player. But but it's like he knew the rules. He knew the rules, and then he was able to break the rules. But you have musicians nowadays that are producing music that they don't know, they didn't know what the rules were. And
Well, it's kind of like clip art music. We'll grab this over here. That sounds cool. Now let's stick it next to this.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not in a related key. I don't even think about keys.
yeah. Or should we put a bridge there? Or I just there's just
and well, there's something there, and I don't want to dismiss that stuff out of hand either, because there were, in the visual arts, you had collages, you had impressionists, you had once cameras took off, the realism, even though it's so impressive to see somebody who can paint something that looks photorealistic, it takes skill to do that. But then people said, well, we've got cameras for that. What can we do that's different? Let's take some found objects, glue them to a canvas, and call that art. And so I think that's kind of what people are doing with samples. And so they're using bits of music as found objects and slamming them together. They may not have ever intended to go together, but they do this thing that what really makes a music successful, I think, is the emotional connection between the artist and the audience. And whatever does that, if it's simple, if it's complex, if it's something that would bore me to tears but makes somebody else go, yeah, it's that emotional response that art gets from the audience, and whatever you do to make that happen, I think is valid. But I get what you're saying. Like for me, growing up with the classical and the choral stuff in my head, I'd heard Western music theory, a lot my whole life. And then when I heard people taking those familiar elements and doing different stuff with them, like the Beatles, like Jack Bruce and Eric Clapton, like, then getting on into the Rolling Stones and James Taylor and Carole King and, people doing stuff that was more based on folk music or Celtic music or Indian music, like that whole rhythmic influence of like, John McLaughlin taking the Indian influence and making the Mahavishnu Orchestra what it was with the odd time signatures, but then incorporating, these dissonant chords that would never exist in classical Indian music, but existed kind of in jazz or in classical or well, I call it classical, with symphonic music, maybe like Stravinsky or Mahler or, Schoenberg, 12-tone stuff. But, all these different combinations that get an emotional response from the audience. It's like, It's all good. It's just, there's I figure if I don't like a song, it probably wasn't written for me. Somebody said that once, and I latched onto that. It's like, yeah, that's perfect.
Or I can turn it off. you know,
Yeah.
I
Oh
was,
yeah.
I,
We don't have to listen to it unless we're in an airplane or a department store or a
yeah, no,
yeah.
yeah. Me and my wife were sitting watching TV. This was about a year or so ago or whatever. And my youngest son, which is living with us for a time until um, he gets some stuff straightened out. But he came to me. He goes, Dad. He says, Pops, I want you to hear something. And I said, I want you to see something. And I said, okay. And so he takes over the controller. He goes to YouTube, and he pulls up this music, and he's sitting there, and I'm watching it, and I'm kind of going, okay, all right. And I had to pause and go, okay, Leonard, open your mind up a little bit, okay.
Yeah.
And he introduced me to Billie Eilish, and
Ah.
I watched a couple of her videos.
Yeah.
And coming from the film and television world that I have come in, besides the music, but I was just incredibly fascinated to
Yeah.
realize that, you know what, they're making this music in their bedroom,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and I just thought, you know, this is not something I would sit down on a regular basis and listen to,
Hmm.
but I was very, very impressed with what they were doing. And I just kind of sat there and I said, okay, well, this 60-year-old, plus, you know, guy that's been involved in music all of his life, I can, I can still learn a few things.
Yeah. Sure.
Would I run out and would I download any Billie Eilish stuff on my playlist now? Probably not, but it was interesting to listen to this stuff. So, well, listen, I got a couple more questions to ask you, and then I'm going to let you go because I so appreciate how much time you've been able to give
Oh,
us.
this has been fun, man. It's
Oh, well,
fun to.
I'm glad it's been good. It's been, yeah. Like I said, we could go on for probably another 2 hours. Uh, so, well, listen. I have a question, and you
Yeah.
looking at your pedigree here. Okay, this may be a little bit easier question than some of the people that I ask. Um, if you had the opportunity, okay, to play with one famous person, being that they're dead or alive, who would that person be?
Oh boy, that is so tough. It's hard to narrow down, and I guess I'm not really trying to evade the question, but I don't really think of things like that as much as some people might. I mean, I've just been grateful for all the opportunities I've had, and I just kind of look for, well, if there's something else coming down the pike, I'll try to be ready for it. I mean, I've I just don't know. I don't know how to answer it. I mean, there's so many great ones, and there are some that I would love to play with, but I don't think I'm good enough to. How's that? I
No,
mean,
but
I
that's
used
a,
to,
that's a
I
great
mean,
answer. Yeah.
I used to, sort of emulate. Well, all these influences I've been talking about. It's like there were things I tried to do like them. I mean, there was the sort of spent a couple of years in the John McLaughlin Mahavishnu world. Never got that kind of speed going, but I appreciated what he was doing with that, and I really enjoyed that. And I guess if I were good enough to hang with that at all, I think I would enjoy playing with a group like that. But I'm just honest. It's like there's some things that I just can't do. I mean, but I've gotten to play with some people where I think the glove really fit, um, but it's something that's already happened, so it's not something I'm looking forward to, you know. But there's a lady named Carter Robertson, her husband Barney, and she both played with Waylon Jennings in the I think it was the late '70s, and also back when again when Waylon kind of put the band back together. I can't remember what decade it was, early 2000s maybe. Um, but she's kind of got this bluesy thing that it's not twangy country. It's like more of a Bonnie Raitt, Bonnie Bramlett thing. And we got to do some stuff, her and her husband, and drums and bass and me, and it fit. And it was one. There's probably some of her stuff on YouTube. Carter Robertson, and you know, it was going back to my blues roots, I guess. You know, from listening to the early Clapton stuff and all that, and it was just fun. You know, got to play slide, got to play some open tunings, got to and so things like that where I've already done them, and I'm going, that was fun, and I would do that again if I could.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. So, advice, okay? Any young musician coming up,
Well,
what advice would you give them?
I mean, I don't know how people are making a living at it these days, but I assume that once things kick back in and crowds are allowed to gather again and safely to do so, you know, if there's somebody offering you a job, be the kind of person you would want to hire. I mean, for me, that was always like, okay, make sure my gear works, make sure I show up in time and, you know, ready to do whatever I'm supposed to do. And, you know, and be nice about it. You know, don't come in with like a huge chip on your shoulder, bad attitude, whatever. You know, come in with the attitude of let's make this thing good. Let's have a good gig tonight. You know, whatever. And yeah, it's hard to do. It's hard to be that 100% all the time. But you know, just be that. You know, be that. And obviously, you know, there's so many different musical styles and whatever you do. And if your aspiration is to be playing musical theater in New York, then be an excellent reader and be versatile and get all your stuff together and figure out how to get there on time. But you know, if you're wanting to be a original club band or whatever, well, come up with some good tunes. Come up with some good tunes and figure out what people want to hear, what makes them want to come see you play. And you know, all of that, I don't think that's changed yet. I mean, you don't get paid for recordings anymore. You know, it's more of like a loss leader. It's like, come see our band, here's our YouTube album, you know.
Yeah.
But used to you'd sell those things and actually maybe make some money off of them. But I don't know. I think that ship has sailed. But
Yeah, well, you know, I think you pointed it out of just being what I call a good human. Okay,
yeah.
a good human. I think I talked with you earlier before the interview. We were talking about, you know, one of the tours I was on. I wanted to get out of the bus so bad. I learned how to drive the equipment truck. And I'm doing this because that wheel is the
that's what you're doing.
I learned how to drive the equipment truck because I just I enjoyed the music we were playing with, and obviously we had an audience that enjoyed it because they were coming out, and we obviously got to tour with Joe English, and but it was like some of the players were not good humans. Okay. And it was,
that's hard to put up with,
you know, and you sit there and you go, okay, you have a piece of real estate on earth, okay, and wherever you walk, that's part of your real estate. Okay? Leave a good footprint, okay, be somebody that, you know, they may want you to come back, okay, or hey, let's have you, you know, and not just, you know, you know. But so I think your advice is like, you know, being just a good human.
That's a great way to sum it up, man. That's a great way to sum it up.
Be a good human, and enjoy who you're with, and enjoy that, enjoy the moment. I remember someone telling me on one of the first big tours I ever went on, it was like, Leonard, enjoy the moment,
Oh yeah.
because you may never have that again. And I remember, from walking backstage to, to the craft service, to the dressing rooms, to the, just enjoying the moment and listening to I remember listening to the crowd, stomp their feet who were getting ready to go on. And I'm sitting there kind of going, if they only knew who I really was, they wouldn't
Oh yeah.
stop there, but yet, there's this illusion that,
Yeah.
that we're this,
Well, it's all sort of this role playing thing. I mean, the audience is playing the role, and they may even be aware that they're playing a role. You're playing the role of we're about to do something that's really going to make you celebrate or whatever. And it's like this anticipation and all that. I mean, I remember going to concerts as a kid, and I was on the back in the auditorium or whatever, and here's Yes coming on, and I hear the last strains of Stravinsky's Firebird Suite, and then I see the guys kind of running through the tunnel coming up to the stage, and it's like, oh man, this is about to happen.
yeah, no, I agree with you. It's part of the thing that, that's kept us going for as long as we've gone. It's like, as long as people keep coming out. And I mean, even at my age, I mean, I'm playing strictly kind of what we call smooth jazz now. It's, I love it. This is my 12th year with Analog Jazz, and I love what I'm doing with these guys, and just absolutely just, but our venues, 95% of our shows got shut down last year. And
I know, man.
and then our Christmas season has always been a big time for us, because we put on a Christmas show, and we had to cancel that because I got COVID. Okay. And our keyboard player got COVID, and our sax player got pneumonia. So it was like, we were just like, okay, this year is just just a mess. But
oh man.
well, listen, let me let's get to a kind of a fun question. I ask all of my guests this question here, and it's very interesting to find out what the result of this question is. So I'll ask you, Paul, if you were stranded on the deserted island, and you could only take only three albums with you, what would those three albums be?
Yeah, and I had to put some thought into this, and that's so limited. And again, I got to qualify my answer. It's like, well, do I want something that I'm totally familiar with, or do I want something that will have some surprises? And so I kind of split the difference, because, I mean, you can only listen to something the first time once.
Yeah.
Every other time, you're either digging more out of it, or you're remembering, oh, I remember why I thought that was so great the first time. But it's not, the same now, because I kind of know what's coming. And to me, what makes music fun are the pleasant surprises. So like the first time I heard Roundabout by Yes, and when it goes into the bridge of, the flowing smooth little thing, in and around the lake, mountains come out of the sky and they stand there, this dramatic stuff. But I guess I would pick the Fragile album by Yes, for something I'm not quite as familiar with, that I might find some fun stuff in if I listen to it enough. Maybe Mahler's Fifth Symphony, something like that. And oh boy, I guess I would have to sort of relive some of my past. Maybe the Beatles' White Album. because that was one of those that had a lot of variety to it. I can still think of some favorite moments, like Everybody's Got Something to Hide Except for Me and My Monkey, Blackbird, Total Contrast, Dear Prudence. Just the beauty of that song just nailed me from the first, and I still enjoy hearing it. So that's a double album, so I cheated a little bit. So
No,
there's three. There's three.
Yeah, someone said, "Hey, can I bring a box set?"
No kidding, really. Yeah, because there's so much great music, and I can't even. I mean, I didn't even mention Ella Fitzgerald or Joe Pass or Oscar Peterson, or there's just so many other things. When I started really getting into jazz, I kind of like experimented with jazz in college, and found out that for me to be even good enough to get in the arena with that, I would take every waking moment of every day. I used to go hear Lenny Breau play solo gigs in Nashville, and he was covering the bass line, harmony, and melody all at once on guitar. And it's like, okay, dude, that's where the bar is now. Okay, I'm not gonna get there anytime soon. So it's a good thing I like some other things.
Well, listen, Paul, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, and
Yeah, absolutely, man.
To reconnect with you, because I truly, I mean, we kind of set the time machine, and we was like, the last time we talked, we were on tour together, and that's
back in the 80s, probably 84, 85.
So it's like, you know, time flies when you're having fun, and then we, obviously took a break, and you made residence in Nashville. I pretty much kind of stayed here in the Sacramento area.
Yeah.
And it's where all my family is, and but not much of a music scene, but we have our pluses. So, but anyway, Paul, it has been a pleasure, and let's not wait another, I don't know, 30 years or so to reconnect. But thank you very much for being on, and our audience appreciates you being on the show. And so I want to say, hey, listen, I guess we'll see you down the road.
All right, man. Well, thanks. It was enjoyable.